Hi, my name is Henry Moore, I'm 58 years old. People see my smile and think I've had a peaceful life, but behind it is a story about betrayal from the ones I loved most. I still remember that morning calm, bright, and warm. I had spent half the night carving a wooden frame for my daughter's wedding photo. I wanted to give it to her before her big day. When I heard a knock on the door, I smiled. It was Clara. My only child. The girl I raised with my own hands after her mother passed away. She walked in, wearing a fine dress that looked expensive. Behind her stood her husband, Ethan, tall, confident, the kind of man who never had to lift a finger in his life. I tried to hide my excitement, thinking they had come to discuss the final plans for the wedding tomorrow. I held up the small box in my hands and said proudly, "Clara, I'm so happy about your wedding tomorrow." But something changed in the air. My words hung there, and suddenly the room went quiet. Clara's face turned pale. She didn't even look at me. And then Ethan gave a short laugh, not the kind of laugh that fills a room, but the kind that slices through it. "The wedding was last week, Mr. Moore," he said, still smirking. For a second, I thought I heard him wrong. My smile froze. "Last week?" Clara finally spoke, her voice shaking. "Dad. I'm sorry. It happened so fast. We didn't want to make it a big thing." I blinked. "You didn't want to make it big? You didn't even want your father there?" She said nothing. Ethan shrugged. "We just wanted something simple. Only close family." "Only close family?" I repeated quietly. I thought I was that. The clock on the wall ticked louder than ever. My hand trembled as I placed the gift box on the table. For the first time in years, I didn't know what to say to my own daughter. Then, as if the air itself couldn't bear the silence, my brother Ray walked in from the kitchen, wiping his hands. "Hey, Henry, who's?" He stopped when he saw their faces. "What's going on?" Clara whispered. "We were just leaving." Ethan put his arm around her and turned toward the door. Before stepping out, he said, "We'll visit when things calm down." The door closed behind them with a soft thud that echoed through my chest. I stood there, staring at the small wooden frame on the table. I had carved her name on it, Clara and Ethan. Ray looked at me, unsure of what to say. "They got married without you, didn't they?" I nodded slowly, my throat tightening. "Seems like it." He muttered something under his breath, but I barely heard it. My eyes stayed fixed on the door, still hoping she might walk back in and say it was all a mistake. But she didn't. Only silence answered me that day, and in that silence, something inside me quietly broke. 2 weeks before that day, life felt peaceful. I was in my small carpentry shop at the back of the house, shaping a piece of oak wood into something beautiful. The air smelled of sawdust and varnish, a smell that always reminded me of better times. I was working on the wedding gift for Clara, my daughter. I wanted it to be perfect. I had planned every detail in my head. I even wrote a short speech I would give at the wedding about love, patience, and how proud I was of the woman she had become. I rehearsed it quietly every night, standing in front of the mirror, feeling both nervous and excited. Clara hadn't been visiting much lately. I told myself it was normal. Weddings were stressful, and she must have been busy. Still, it hurt when she didn't pick up my calls. When she finally answered one evening, her voice sounded distant. "Hi, Dad," she said quickly. "Sorry. I've just been busy with plans." "Everything's fine." "I know, sweetheart," I replied. "I just wanted to know what time to be ready for the rehearsal." She hesitated. "I'll call you tomorrow. Okay?" "All right," I said, smiling to myself. "Don't forget." But tomorrow came and went. The phone stayed silent. My brother Ray stopped by often, always bringing strong opinions. "You're wasting your time worrying," he told me one night. "That man of hers doesn't respect you." I shook my head. "Ethan's young, Ray. He'll learn. I just want Clara to be happy." Ray frowned. "You're too soft, Henry. You've given her everything. Don't let them walk over you." I didn't answer. I went back to polishing the frame I had made. It was smooth and shining, with the words "Forever Begins Here" carved at the bottom. I wanted it to remind Clara that no matter where she went, she'd always have a home with me. The next day, I went out to buy a shirt for the wedding, white, simple, nothing fancy. The salesman asked, "Big event coming up?" I smiled proudly. "My daughter's wedding." That night, I laid everything out neatly on the bed. My new shirt, the polished shoes, the small gift box. I even placed an old photograph beside them. Clara as a little girl, standing beside her mother in our garden, both covered in flour after baking. I wanted to show it to her that day, maybe make her laugh before she said her vows. But the call never came. Instead, I spent that Saturday morning drinking coffee alone, waiting for her message. By noon, I grew restless and tried calling again. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I told myself it was just nerves, maybe they changed the schedule. I didn't want to believe anything was wrong. So I waited. Morning turned to evening. Evening turned to silence. And in that silence, I never knew my daughter was already married. After that painful visit, the house fell into a kind of silence I had never known before. Every corner felt heavy, the hall, the kitchen, even my workshop. It was as if the walls themselves had absorbed my disappointment. For days, I didn't touch a single tool. The wooden frame I made for Clara sat on the table, still wrapped, still waiting for hands that would never take it. Each morning, I'd walk past it and look away, pretending it wasn't there. Ray came around often. He didn't like seeing me that way. "You can't let this eat you alive," he said, setting down a bag of groceries one afternoon. I just nodded, not really listening. He sighed. "Henry, you did everything right. Don't blame yourself for her choices." I looked at him and said softly, "I must have done something wrong. Ray, a child doesn't just forget her father." He didn't have an answer for that. He just sat down and poured us both a cup of tea. We drank in silence. At night, I would sit by the kitchen window and talk to my late wife, Mary, like I used to. "You would have known what to say," I whispered to her picture. "She always listened to you better than me." The truth was, I missed my daughter more than I was angry. I kept remembering the little girl who used to follow me around the shop, wearing my old work gloves that swallowed her tiny hands. She'd laugh and say, "Look, Daddy, I'm working too." Now, she belonged to another world, a world where I didn't fit. One morning, I finally went back to my shop. I thought maybe working would help clear my head. The smell of sawdust filled the air, bringing a bit of peace. I turned on the radio just for noise, not really paying attention. Then I overheard something unexpected. Two men were talking near the door. Customers picking up an order. "You hear about that young businessman, Ethan?" one said. "Lost a ton of money in some bad deal. His company's almost gone." "Already? That was fast." The other replied. "He looked like the type who thought he could buy luck." They laughed and left. I froze where I stood, my hands still resting on the table. Ethan, my daughter's husband. For a long moment, I didn't move. I didn't smile either. It wasn't joy I felt. It was something quieter. Something that almost felt like justice. I brushed the sawdust from my shirt and took a deep breath. I didn't wish pain on anyone, not even him. But I knew this life had a way of teaching lessons words never could. That evening, I locked the shop early and sat on the porch, watching the sunset fade behind the trees. For the first time in weeks, I felt the faintest bit of calm. I didn't know it yet, but that calm wouldn't last long. Because soon, they would come back, and this time, they wouldn't be laughing. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when I heard a soft knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Ray had gone to visit a friend, and I was halfway through fixing an old chair that a neighbor brought in. The knocking came again, this time slower, weaker. I wiped my hands on a cloth and opened the door. Standing there were Clara and Ethan. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Clara looked nothing like the bright young woman who had walked out of my house weeks ago. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale. Ethan's confident posture was gone. His shoulders were slumped. His tie loose. His hair unkempt. "Dad," Clara whispered. Her voice cracked. "Can we come in?" I stepped aside silently. They walked in, but the house suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. Ethan glanced around awkwardly, clearing his throat. "It's been a rough time," he said. I didn't reply. I just folded my arms and waited. Clara sat on the edge of the couch, holding her hands tightly together. "Dad, we've lost everything," she said, tears welling up. "Ethan's business collapsed. We don't even have a place to stay." I looked at her carefully. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said quietly. Ethan spoke quickly, his voice tight. "We just need to stay here for a while until we can sort things out. A week or two, that's all." From the kitchen doorway, I heard a familiar voice. Ray had returned. "Well, look who decided to visit," he said dryly, leaning against the frame. "Didn't have room for your old man at the wedding, but you've got room for his house now." Clara covered her face with her hands, crying harder. "Uncle Ray, please. Don't. I know what we did was wrong." Ray glanced at me. "Henry?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at my daughter, the same girl who once ran to me after every fall. Who called me her hero. Now she sat there. Broken. Ashamed. Asking for help from the father she'd once forgotten. Clara's voice trembled. "Dad, I know I hurt you. I thought I was doing the right thing. I wanted to fit in, to make them respect me. But I lost everything and I don't know where else to go. Her words cut through me, but so did the memory of her laughter being replaced by silence, the sound of that door closing after her wedding. I took a slow breath. You didn't just hurt me, Clara, I said quietly. You made me invisible. Ethan lowered his eyes. Ray crossed his arms, waiting for my decision. For a moment, I thought of saying yes, of letting them stay. But the part of me that had spent weeks in silence, the part that had been ignored and humiliated, had finally found its voice. I stood there, looking at the two of them, and knew exactly what I needed to say next. For a long moment, no one spoke. The room was filled only with the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Clara sat crying softly, Ethan kept his head down. And I stood there, holding the weight of every memory in my chest. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm, steady, but cold. You both made your choices, I said quietly. You decided who mattered and who didn't. Clara looked up, tears running down her cheeks. Dad, please. We were wrong. I was wrong. I should have invited you, I should have listened. I didn't mean to hurt you. I took a slow step forward. You didn't just forget me, Clara. You erased me. Do you know what it felt like to sit at home, dressed for your wedding, waiting for a call that never came? To hear from strangers that my daughter got married without her father? She covered her mouth, crying harder. Ethan reached out, trying to speak. Sir, I cut him off with a raised hand. Don't call me that. The day you laughed in my house was the day you stopped earning that respect. He froze, unable to look at me. Ray stood quietly in the corner, arms crossed, saying nothing. He didn't need to. His silence spoke enough. I looked at my daughter one last time. I could see the guilt in her eyes. But I could also see the same pride that once blinded her. You both thought you were too good for me, I said softly. Too good for this old house, too good for the man who worked his hands raw just to give you a life better than his own. Dad. Please. Clara whispered. We have nowhere else to go. I took a deep breath and said the words that had been sitting in my chest since the day they walked out. Get out of here. The sound of those words seemed to hang in the air. Clara shook her head in disbelief, then stood slowly. You don't mean that. I didn't move. You had a home once, Clara. You just didn't want it. She turned to Ethan, her voice breaking. Let's go. Ethan helped her stand, and together they walked toward the door. When they reached it, Clara turned around for one last look. Her lips trembled as if she wanted to say something, but no words came. Ray stepped forward and opened the door. They walked out quietly, leaving the house just as empty as the day they shut me out of their lives. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it for a while. My hands were steady, but my heart felt heavier than ever. Still, for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. I walked to the table and picked up the wooden frame I had made for her. The ribbon was dusty now. I unwrapped it carefully, revealing the carving "Forever Begins Here." I placed it on the shelf beside Mary's picture and whispered, "She'll learn. Mary. One day. She'll understand." The house was silent again, but it no longer felt empty, just honest. And in that honesty, I finally found peace. Thanks for watching and don't forget to subscribe for more.